Hi guys, this is Ciro Nieli. I am the executive producer of Nickelodeon's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and you are listening to the Master of One podcast.
Welcome to this Sandbox episode of the Master of One podcast, part 2 for this week. This week we talked to creative jack of all trades, staff writer at Cartoon Network, Mark Fujita. I'm Andrew, your Master of Art and Design.
I'm Patrick, your Master of Television and Film.
And I'm Luke, your Master of Toys and Games.
So get that notepad ready, because it's time to get schooled.
I don't want to write anything anymore.
So for this Sandbox episode, we are excited to talk to somebody who is a producer, voiceover actor, and all-around creative staff writer at Cartoon Network. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mark Fujita to the show.
Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Good to have you, man.
I love it. I think you're the first person we've had on the show that can, well, since you can write, I assume you can read. And I think that this is a huge milestone for us.
Right.
It's only taken us 200 and some odd episodes to get there, but hey,
get here,
congratulations.
Wait a second. We've had people that
Excellent.
have written books on the show.
Yeah, but writing. Well, I guess that's exactly what Patrick just said. So anyway, so Mark, we're excited to have you on the show. You, like I just listed off a handful of things and not even scratched the surface of who you are. So give us
Right.
the Wikipedia page, the Reader's Digest condensed version of your story, and let all of us know who you are and what you do.
Okay. My name is Mark Fujita. I'm currently a staff writer at Cartoon Network on an undisclosed show. I guess my path to this point, I graduated from the Academy of Art College in San Francisco with a Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Motion Pictures and Video. Mm-hmm. And then from then, I was an intern at IGN, and then I was a copy editor at a Chinese comic book company called Comics One, and then I was a game tester at EA, and then I decided to make the big move from San Francisco to LA because there were no jobs really in the animation industry. And that was like a 400-mile commute, I guess. And then the first job that I had down in LA, which actually was in Burbank, was an internship for an anime dubbing company called Bang Zoom Entertainment. And then I was there. I rose the ranks to creative director. And then I think a few years later, I was able to make a bunch of connections, and I was able to break into Warner Brothers, and I was lucky enough to get an assistant production manager position on Green Lantern, the animated series.
Wow, yeah.
And then from then, I went on to the Scooby WrestleMania DTV, which is the direct-to-video. And then I jumped around to different companies such as Titmouse, Bento Box, and then I came back to Warner Brothers. And Starburns. And then just recently, I was lucky enough to get the staff writing position at Cartoon Network.
What is the time span for this? Because
16 weeks. That's it.
Is this like 5 years? Or is this
No. This is, let me think. It's about, I would have to say 17 years.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
holy cow, those are some names. For a second, you made the comment that I made the long move or the long transition, and I was thinking, oh, he's still in California. 400,
Right.
400 miles is a bit. So yeah,
No,
you definitely.
yeah.
That's a big change to make. And so, were you at that point? were you kind of starting over when it came to like the professional relationships that you had, at least locally, or were you kind of leveraging those to make that transition?
Yeah, it was actually a huge reset for me. It was huge. It was a huge leap for me, as well as like a lot of people who had moved 400 miles away from home. But the weird thing is that when I moved down to Burbank, it really didn't feel like I never felt homesick. I just felt like this was the right thing to do because up north, I mean, you have like Pixar and you have Lucas, but really those are the only two companies in the Bay Area. And so if you don't get into one of those, you're kind of left to like a lot of the smaller companies. And I really wanted, I mean, I'm Japanese, so I love anime, and I really wanted to break into Japanese animation. And even though it was just a dubbing company, I felt like it was the right like first step to get into anime.
Sure.
So was your goal to be an animator specifically? I mean, that's what it kind of sounded like from your college background, and then some of the path that you were taking.
My first goal was actually the Academy of Art is really well known to set you up as an editor, like a video editor.
Okay.
So for the longest time, I wanted to be that, but I just couldn't break into that sort of job. And then when I got into Bang Zoom, even though I started out as like an intern, and I was really just like setting up schedules and like calling different voice actors and making sure that the booth and the studio was clean and ready and the scripts were ready to go. I found out that the president actually wanted to get into like original, like creative things. And because he found out I had a film background, he actually kind of opened up. And then we were going to Anime Expo, and I created this like intro video for him with all like the voice actors and everything, and it kind of introduced Bang Zoom to the public, and he was really happy with that. And then he started doing more original projects. There was like an Adventures in Voice Acting documentary that I got to travel to like Texas, and I got to travel to New York, and then I got to meet like Tony Oliver, and together he was like, "You guys go to Japan, and we're gonna try to make a Robotech documentary and a Power Rangers documentary."
Wow.
Yeah.
How is that? I mean, that's a story. Like,
So I guess because of my background, because of the film background, and because I do know I'm not fluent in Japanese, but I'm like highly skilled in Japanese. Mm-hmm. So he was like, we can send Mark and Tony Oliver. And for those who don't know, Tony Oliver is the voice of Rick Hunter, and he's also the producer on Power Rangers. So it was like a 2-hit combo where it's like, oh, we'll go to Japan. We'll go set up interviews with the creators of Macross and the creators. I got to go and interview the head producer at Toei, and he talked about like he was the producer since like 1979 on the Super Sentai, and then we also got to interview the artist who designed all of the monsters in Power Rangers, and so that was like crazy, like an adventure. But
like when you say he designed all the monsters for Power Rangers, I mean I grew up on the Power Rangers. They were my jam. And I just remember the ridiculousness of these monsters, especially going back and watching some of like the replays now. There was like an ice cream monster, and
no, absolutely, yeah.
Oh my gosh, they're so crazy. What was that experience like, connecting with somebody who created these characters that ended up becoming, essentially for a generation, kind of pop culture icons?
I mean, it was crazy for me. It was definitely a check off of the bucket list, because for me, I actually, when I was little, my parents would go to the Japanese video store, and we would get the Super Sentai videos like years before Power Ranger even existed. So by the time that Power Rangers came out, I was way too old for Power Rangers, but at the same time I would be like, hey, look at that show. That show's like the show that I used to watch. I'm going to watch it ironically. And then secretly I was like, I love this show. and I would continue watching it. And to this day, I still check up on it. But one of my dreams for working for a company was to actually travel with them. And I got that opportunity there. And then to actually have the opportunity to travel to Japan and then go to the actual company that made Power Rangers was awesome.
Yeah.
And so while you were there, did you actually do some voice acting?
When I was at Bang Zoom, not in Japan, but in Burbank, they would always let the interns try it out, and then they kind of learned that I was really interested in not necessarily pursuing voice acting as a career, but just, I mean, it's the dream of every anime fan to be in anime, and so just to have that opportunity, and at the same time, it was getting that booth experience of how to handle the mic and just to project and that sort of thing. That experience kind of helped me understand, okay, well, this is great. I don't think I want to pursue this as a career, but it was great experience.
Well, so that's the thing that, okay, so you had, give or take 500 jobs in 15 years. I mean, you had a few, right? You moved around, maybe not that many, but it was a few. And then, but on top of that, we have, okay, video editing initially is kind of the thought. And then we move into, I know at some point you started doing some writing, but then you talked, but there was some voiceover work. I don't know how extensive it is. I know that you were also kind of producing your own videos on the side. And then you were, doing these interviews. You talked about pursuing some of the animating, and then to jump to the future now, the staff writing position. So not only have the jobs changed a lot, but the responsibilities have changed a lot. So was this a period of discovery of what you really wanted to do? Was this, a bit of an indicator of getting bored easily? What was happening in this, this 17-year span, moving around, not just geographically and not just within organizations, but also moving between job titles?
So for me, I was always interested in being a creative. I was always the kid, the artist kid. I would always, when I was in high school, I would draw comics and write comics, and I was never really interested in just being a penciler or an inker or just a writer. I was interested in being the guy who created the entire book. So it's I was interested in being Todd McFarlane or Eric Larson and creating Spawn or Savage Dragon.
Sure.
Just creating everything. And the strange thing is that I noticed when I would create comic books, I would think of the story, and then my drawing skills weren't quite up to par. So by the time I finished the first book, I had always thought of the stories for issue 50. I'd be issue 50 down the road in the writing.
That's
and
ambitious.
I'd only been... No, absolutely. So when I finished issue 1, I felt like I was behind. I had all these stories that I wanted to tell. And so when I went into it was a weird thing, because when I went into college, I was like, oh, I'm gonna focus on motion pictures, because when I was in high school, I took this video production class and I really enjoyed it. And so I was like, okay, I'll do that. And then when I graduated, I actually during my junior year, I realized, and this was when I was in college, there was no YouTube. There was no like uploading your video to anywhere. So what you would have to do is you would have to like buy film stock, record, get a print, and then send it to festivals. And you weren't even guaranteed that like they would accept you.
Yeah.
Let alone like win a contest to get the chance to go to like some Hollywood producer. So I wasn't really interested in that. But then I fell back on my comics and I was like, well, what if I combine comics with film? And that's where I got to animation. I always loved animation. So for the last year of college, I switched my major over. I didn't really switch my major over. I think I took a minor in animation. Mm-hmm. And so after that, I wasn't quite like a film major and I wasn't quite an animation major. So I kind of like fell off the map a little bit. So sure. I had to like kind of find my way to become, I guess, essentially what I am today. And it was kind of a crazy journey because when I got into Warner Brothers for the first time as an assistant production manager on Green Lantern, I thought I wanted to be a board artist. So I actually pursued that for about 5 years. And then I realized that I was around all of these like pros, and I was nowhere near the level that I needed to be to become a board artist. And it never occurred to me to be a writer because I always just assumed that you had to major in English or journalism, or like you had to know like AP style and all this.
Right. Yeah, you had to cite in MLA.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so and then at the same time it was like there's no way. And there's kind of a stigma where it's like you go to Hollywood, everyone's either an actor or a writer.
Yeah.
Sure.
Everyone has a story, and I didn't want to be kind of judged by that.
Yeah.
So it took me a while to get to writing, and it was actually up until I was working on Justice League Action as an assistant production manager, and at that point I was like, you know what? I really want to be a writer. I think I'm at the level that I need to be, because I would write scripts, I'd give them to my friends, and they would be like, hey, this is good. Yeah, and it's like, hey, this is good. Just change this little thing, and then you're good. And I'm like, is that it? Like, am I at a pro level now? And I wasn't really sure.
Sure.
And so, luckily for me, I got teamed up with this director on Justice League Action, who's amazing, who's phenomenal, who's actually the showrunner for Bunnicula now. But he kind of took me under his wing. And there was an opportunity that really didn't seem like an opportunity. So what happened was one of the scripts came in. My director said it was garbage. And he was going back and forth with the writer.
This isn't one that you wrote. Someone else wrote this.
This is one that someone else wrote. So then they kept going back and forth. And finally, the writer was like, hey, it's like, you need to put these notes into final draft. And my director was like, hey, Mark, you know Final Draft, right? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, he threw me the script and he's like, put these notes into Final Draft. And then what ended up happening was that night I put the notes in. I was like, you know what? All this needs is dialogue. So then I just was like, all right, let me take a chance, put in the dialogue. And then I, fully knowing that I could get fired for this sort of thing. And so I turned it into my director. He was like, this is amazing. Fantastic. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I was like, well, I better check with the writer, because the writer was my friend. He was actually a head writer on Green Lantern. And so I gave it to him, just expecting the worst. And he was like, this is awesome. I didn't want to write this. Like, you did me a huge favor.
Thanks for doing my job.
And I was like, okay, cool. And then from then on, my director was like, Mark can write. I'm going to throw him all these scripts. And the thing is, I didn't get paid. I didn't get credit. But at the same time, it was the the greatest like education I could have gotten. Like, because I look at it like I could have went to UCLA, paid $5,000 for a course that I don't even know if I'm at a level to be in the industry, versus what I got, which was I pay nothing. I'm working on a Warner Brothers show that is gonna air, and I know like at what level I'm at, and then at the end of that, I actually the writer called me and was like, "Hey, Mark, I hear that they're letting you go. Like, it's the end of your contract." And I was like, "Yeah, it sucks, but you know, what are you going to do?" And he's like, "Great. Now you can pitch writing to me." And so from there, I got to pitch like 10 ideas. They liked 4. They sent it to the execs, and I was able to get one Justice League action script. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I want to kind of hone in on a couple of things.
Right.
First of all, you seem to me as clear as day that you are a guy who goes after a thing, and you drive after it, you drive after it, you drive after it. And you've been doing this for 17 years, is that what you said?
Yeah,
okay,
around that. Yeah.
Okay, so roughly almost 2 decades worth of pushing and pushing and pushing. And there's 2 specific things I want to ask about in reference to that. One, before we talked, and I think you've alluded to it at least in the actual episode, but before we started recording, you had said that this is an opportune moment because when you first agreed to talk to us, when we first scheduled you, you weren't where you wanted to be, but now you're kind of, this is the thing you've been driving after. You are in the position that you're driving after. So, but then you also said a couple of times in this interview, multiple times you said that you were lucky enough to do X, Y, Z, whatever it is. So 2 things. One, how much do you think luck actually has to do with it? If you were to get real honest, and then, you know, obviously compared to how much you actually pushed for it and you made this stuff happen.
Yes.
And then 2, what have you had to sacrifice over these 17 years? So maybe start there, and then I can re-ask that maybe deeper question. But but how much does luck, quote unquote, have to actually do with this for you?
Well, I mean, the thing is that I don't try to put myself over as far as like, oh, I knew this was going to happen sort of thing.
Sure.
I always, that's why I say it's luck, because the thing is, I know that every job that I got throughout the years is someone else's dream job. It was never my dream job. But it's like, even interning at Bang Zoom Entertainment, which is like, to a lot of people, it's a huge opportunity. It's a huge anime dubbing company. And it's like, I was able to break in, and I was able to climb the ladder. So I'm not sure. As far as jumping into Warner Brothers, though, I feel extremely fortunate, because the thing is that it requires a lot of skill and a lot of talent. But this industry is, you could have all the talent, you could have all the skill, but you could essentially never break in. And it happens because it happened to me because of the people that I knew. So I worked at Bang Zoom. They ended up letting me go, and then they hired this guy to take over my position. And then a year down the line, I meet up with the guy, and I want to hate him because he didn't take my position, but it kind of feels like he took my position. But then I'm like, you know what? Let me meet this guy. And I meet the guy, and he's like super cool, and I'm like, I can't hate this guy. He's too cool.
Like, yeah, I would have hired you too.
And then down the line, he became the production manager for the reboot of Thundercats. And so he was having a how to break into animation panel that I went to. And luckily I already knew him. So then afterwards I joined him for karaoke that night, and I was like, hey, look, you work for Warner Brothers and Thundercats. I will do anything to like break in. I will be a janitor, whatever it takes. And he was like, you don't have to be a janitor, just give me your resume. And the funny thing is that up until that point, I had been unemployed for a year. And so I was just looking for any kind of any shot that he was willing to offer. And I had been applying everywhere. And then just meeting him, I gave him my resume. Like the next day I got an interview. And then 2 weeks after that, I was hired.
So you're still, I mean, and that's an incredible story, but that's still, even going back to like, you know, you being situationally put in a place where things happen to you and like these circumstances are happening around you, you are still taking the initiative and
you're
putting forth
on
the
those
effort.
situations.
Well, a lot of people could have just said, I hate this guy and never, you know, not gone any further than that. So I think, you know, give yourself the credit.
Well, I think it's even beyond that. You could have just, even if you decided to not hate the guy and be like, you know, whatever, he's cool. You could have just been, I want to get to know him think I'm cool, and then maybe something will happen. But you just said, what do I have to do to get there? Like, I want to be there. So you put yourself out there continually. And I think that's the thing that I've noticed, like Andrew said.
So I want to cycle then to the second part of that question, which is arguably a deep question. 17 years you have experience, and you've worked your way through lots of different things, and so many things that I have questions about, but we won't even have time to explore right now. But what have you had to sacrifice to get to where you are right now, and where you are right now is arguably the thing you've been striving for the last 17 years. You are at the culmination of what these last 17 years have been about. What have you had to sacrifice to get there?
I mean, at this point, because I'm a staff writer and because I have my dream job, it doesn't really feel like a sacrifice. But during the time, it was really hard. A few things that I had to sacrifice was, well, obviously I moved 400 miles from where I was raised as a kid. But even then, it was like I have tons of friends who went to college and who would constantly like be like, I'm homesick. I yearn to be back. But for me, it was like, it felt like I was where I was supposed to be. So I don't know, like to me, it's a sacrifice, but it doesn't really feel like a sacrifice. I think the major sacrifice was the moment I realized I needed to give up art. That was a major sacrifice. Like I mentally had to be like, because I had always recognized myself as an artist, like drawing and like Photoshop and even like editing and whatnot. And there was a point where I told myself, it's like, you need to try the writing. You need to give up. And granted, it's not like I can still draw, but it was more of like a mental thing where it was like, you need to give this writing thing a go because you don't want to be 80 and be like, if I would have just shifted
this
the way
could
that
be
I
your
thought.
Trajectory, and you don't want to ignore that.
Exactly. And so I think that happened. I think that happened about 4 years ago when I was like, I need to give up art. I need to give up the fact that I'm an artist.
That's a tough hurdle to get over. And, gosh.
And the weird thing though is that I noticed just this year, early in the year, I would talk to all these like artists and executive producers and whatnot, and they too were like, and they were already like showrunners and like directors and whatnot, and they're like, we're making the shift to be a writer, which I thought was really odd, but I guess in their minds, writing is where the true creation process starts.
Sure.
So it's like, because you can, throughout being a assistant production manager / production coordinator, I found that it's like when you storyboard a script, you may take like a page, and it may take you a week to do that page. And then if there's any changes, it may take you another week to make those changes. But as a writer, you look at that page and you could make those changes in an hour. Like you just retype.
Yeah.
And so I noticed that there were things where it's like they wouldn't tell the writers to change their scripts. They would just take it to boards, and even if it was wrong, they would tell the board artists to change it, and it would take a lot of money and a lot of production time. And so I think a part of me was like, well, if I can help everyone out and go to the writing phase, then it will make everyone's lives easier.
Sure.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah. No. It does, yeah.
So I do want to circle up to one thing before we take into final questions, and it's actually when you were talking about the idea of pushing through as opposed to luck and how some people don't make it, I can't help but believe that you being as extroverted as you are, that hasn't played some part. I mean, I know that we've talked to artists in the past that they've talked about really the thing that separated them from someone else was them just being willing to talk to someone or being willing to, whether it was make a phone call, send an email, whatever it is. The point is they were able to just put themselves out there and not fear rejection on some level. And I think that's very likely one of the separators for you is that I think you said something about karaoke. There are plenty of people that would not be willing to get close to anything that was, resembled karaoke. So the reality
at Luke right now.
He can't live within 50 miles of a place that has karaoke. It's what it is. So just the fact that you're willing to do that, I mean, I don't know if that resonates with you at all, but I can't, I have to believe that has served you well, that you're able to do that.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I don't think about me now. I think about like me in elementary school. And when I was in elementary school, I was very introverted. And so throughout elementary school and high school and college, I would take like specific classes to like speech classes or like public speaking classes. And because I knew that I wasn't good at that. And so I would always tackle my weaknesses. And so at this point, you telling me that I'm an extrovert, I mean, I look at myself now and I'm like, yeah, I am an extrovert, but for me, it still feels like I'm that introvert. But but yeah, I mean, for me, it's like if I wasn't a go-getter and able to go out and like do the karaoke and be able to call people and email people for like to go have lunch or whatever, I really wouldn't get anywhere. Mm-hmm. So like for me, it's like,
yeah,
I'm more afraid of not being able to get where I need to go versus calling you guys and saying, hey, I would like to be interviewed. That sounds amazing. Sure. Or like have lunch with a writer who, I mean, and the thing is when I'm having lunch with the writer, it's not necessarily I'm like, give me a job. Like he knows that, but at the same time, it's like, hey, I want to know a little bit more about you, and hopefully you want to know a little bit more about me, so that the next time that I email you or contact you, you'll be like, hey, that Mark guy is cool. Let's consider him for whatever. I may not have anything.
Based.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I have met a lot of artists and who are extremely introverted, but I feel like there's like a scale of like talent versus how introverted you can be. So it's like, for me, it's like I always felt that I was low on the talent pole. So I had to be like that much more extroverted. and like put myself out there and be willing to do whatever it takes, be willing to, I mean, because I understand like it is very scary to give your script to someone and then have them redline it like completely and like be like, this is all garbage. You need to change these things. Because that happened to me on JLA. I'd get it back and then I'd be like mortified and crushed. But then the next day I would pick myself up and be like, okay, well, are these notes valid? And for the most part, most of the time they are. And so I'd be like, oh, I can see what they mean by these changes, type them up, send it back. And, but I guess that's just all growth. And, And the other thing is that, I mean, I go back to the whole luck thing because I know that there are like millions of people in Hollywood and who'd kill to have the opportunity that I had to get this position. And it's like, how is it that I'm different than all those people? And it's like, I've been to like writing caucuses where there's like the creator of Doc McStuffins. And I see her and she talks and it's great. And then at the end of the night, everyone in the audience is rushing the stage. And at that point, I'm like, I'm just like all these people are looking for a job. Yeah. And it's like, what sets me apart from these people? And what can I do so that I'm just not another person going up there being like, give me a job?
So I think this is actually a good place to continue that thought. We'll actually move into final questions. Okay. You made a comment earlier. You made the comment about every job that I have is someone else's dream job. Right. And so talk to me, and this may be along the lines of what you were just saying, but about what that perspective does for you when you're, you mentioned earlier that you weren't quite where you wanted to be, and then now, this latest job maybe is pushing you more to that area. That being said, who's to say that, maybe 2 years from now or whatever you go, well, actually, maybe this thing is a little bit better fit. I mean, it's possible we've just had 17 years of that. So, So when you have those feelings, because certainly there are people listening right now that have that feeling that go like, I'm not sure I'm doing what I want to be. Like, I'm sitting behind this desk, but I want to be over there behind that, with that piece of paper or whatever it is. How do you set perspective and how do you use that thought that, hey, this is someone else's dream job to maybe like get you through those points and keep performing at a high level?
So usually initially when I get the job, so for example, when I got the job as an intern for Bang Zoom, initially there's like the period of like the honeymoon period, which is like, oh, I'm in the anime industry. I get to meet like all these anime voice actors. But then after a while you get into that point where it's like this, I really want to be a writer or an artist or whatever. And then if I don't think about like, this is somebody else's dream job, I kind of take it for granted. And then I could easily quit that job and be like, I'm going to move on to the next thing. Versus this is somebody else's dream job. I'm very fortunate to be here. I'm going to take in as much as I can out of this position. And because really, like, I was at Bang Zoom for almost 3 years, and I could have easily quit after the first year because I'm like, this isn't what I want to do. But on a resume, 3 years looks better than 1 year. Right. And so, and the thing is, it actually happened down to the wire because when I originally agreed to this interview, I was working on Bob's Burgers as a production coordinator, and everyone turns their head. Like, I noticed, like, when you say I work on Green Lantern, people are like, what's okay? And then you're like, I work at Warner Brothers. And like, oh, I know what that is. And I noticed that the moment I got hired onto Bob's Burgers, everyone turned their heads because everyone knew what Bob's Burgers was.
That's a property that everybody gets on board with.
Right, absolutely. And the thing is that for me, I had made the decision I am only going to take writing positions. But this opportunity came by, and it was like, crap, it's Bob's Burgers. Like, I love Bob's Burgers. Everybody loves Bob's Burgers.
Sure.
If I pass this by, then I may regret it. And at the same time, it was like my unemployment was just about up. And so it was like, I better take this, and I better just ride it out. And the crazy thing is that it was the best coordinating job I've ever had, which I mean, they had the most money. They had been going on for 7 seasons. All the perks, like the first day I was there, they gave me a Bob's Burgers sweatshirt. And then the next week they gave me the Bob's Burgers album. So it's like there's no reason for me to complain, except for the fact that I was like, I want to be a writer. And every day I would pass by the writer's room and I'd be like, that is what I want. And they would be like joking and laughing. And it's like, how do I get in there? And, you know, there's like with any job, there's protocol. You can't just like go up to people, and you can't like, especially after your like first week. So you have to like
kind of like, I want to be in that room. So how do I get there?
You can't. You got to work your
lunch in there. It's
yeah. you gotta work your way up to that. But at the same time, it was kind of grueling. Where it was like, I'm at this great company, but I'm doing this job that it's not me. And the job that I want is right over there.
Yeah.
So it just so happened that, and the other thing with the dream job, and I call it like the miracle job too, working as a writer on Cartoon Network, because it was like, and this is the good thing about jumping to different companies, is I had worked at Titmouse years prior on this show called TurboFast, which was god-awful. And my boss hated me, and he spent every waking moment trying to get me fired. And he succeeded, so he won. But that took like a 5-month process. But during that time, I'd made friends with a bunch of the animators and a bunch of the artists there. So, and at the moment, I was like, I don't know why the universe is like, you get this job at Titmouse, because it was such like a horrible experience for me. But at the same time, 4 years later, or 3 years later, I have lunch with my friend, who our other mutual friend was who I met at Titmouse, was pitching a show at Cartoon Network. And at the time I was like really into like, I really want to, I have a show that I want to pitch. So I was going to have lunch with him, figure out how I go about pitching to Cartoon Network. During that lunch, he was like, well, they do take outside pitches, but usually it's better if you're internal. Like if you're working for the company, they're more open to hearing your pitch. And so I was like, oh, that's unfortunate. Well, and then I just so happened to let him know that I wanted to be a writer. He perked up, was like, hey, our other mutual friend who worked at Titmouse is farther on along the pitching process. He actually got a soft green light. He's actually looking for writers. And so then I contacted him, sent him my samples, and 2 weeks later, I had this job. And so if I hadn't worked at Titmouse, I would have never met this guy. And had I not had lunch with this guy who really wasn't connected to the guy, if I hadn't had that first lunch, then it could have easily passed me by.
Sure.
And that's why I say I was extremely lucky.
Yep.
Right.
Because a certain circumstance was very slim and specific for me to get the staff writing position.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, that kind of stuff, I think I'll go back to what I said before. The key is that you capitalize on those things. And that's
right.
the thing that not everybody does. My final question, I mean, you're focused on something, you know, we've already said it. When you have something in your sights, you focus on it and you make it happen. What is the thing that you do, or how do you recharge? What's the thing that you do when you're not writing, when you're not focusing on your career, quote unquote, for you to get back? Because I mean, you're extroverted. I would say you're an extroverted introvert still, because I don't think anybody truly changes that.
You're an intentional introvert.
Yeah.
That's the phrase that came in my mind when you were talking earlier.
But what I know from being an introvert is at some point you need to recharge yourself. So like what do you do when you're not being the guy that is that everybody wants to be around?
Karaoke, obviously. Here,
that's my quiet recharge time.
Well,
quiet recharge.
I mean, for all geeks and nerds, we all have the video games.
Sure.
We all have I have a PS4. We all watch. I don't know if we all watch Game of Thrones. Do we all watch Game of Thrones?
Oh, we watch Game of Thrones.
You're in good company right now. I can't speak to everybody.
Right. But Game of Thrones, TV, Rick and Morty. I actually watch a lot of TV and animation cartoons right now. I used to be like hardcore otaku, watching anime. I have an extensive collection of manga at home. I used to always go, weekly, I would go pick up manga from Little Tokyo or Japantown.
Nice.
But it's interesting because over the past few years, I've kind of slowed down, and I think it's because I switched to being a writer, and rather than, it sounds weird, but rather than reading about other people's stories, I kind of wanted to create my own.
Sure.
And
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
And so I think at this point, it's it's strange to me because there's a lot of people in animation and even at Bang Zoom who they're in the anime industry and they're in the animation industry, but there's quite a few people who don't watch animation. Mm-hmm. They only watch what they're working on.
Sure.
And I always found that really weird to me because I was always interested in what is everyone else doing? What I want to make sure that if I'm writing or I'm creating, it's I'm not necessarily copying something, or if I am copying something, I know that I'm copying something.
Sure.
And it's also you get inspired by other different styles and other different shows. And so I guess for me, it's right now I'm watching Rick and Morty, mm-hmm. and the new DuckTales just aired, mm-hmm. and I have friends working on that, and that show is amazing. And yeah.
So it sounds like for you to recharge, it's just researching more work. So,
yeah. Well, it reminds me of Trudy Castle, to be fair.
Yeah,
it's a similar thing.
Absorbing as much as you possibly can so that you have the right inspiration to move your projects forward. It makes total sense. Tell everybody where they can find you, where they can support what you're doing. They can check you out all over the internet.
Well, right now, if you watch Justice League Action, a lot of the episodes that are airing right now are secretly my episodes.
Okay, these are the ones that you were talking about that you were writing.
Yeah.
Okay.
The one that I can talk about because everyone knows is there was an episode called Playdate, which is the video game episode. It's the Street Fighter episode. I don't know if you guys have watched that episode. And then there's the short that I got to do is they just recently started airing like the 2 to 3 minute shorts, and I got to write one of those. And I guess I can let you guys know when that's airing.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then I can definitely let you guys know. Like right now, I can't tell you what show I'm on, but it's really amazing. Like,
can you say it in Japanese? We don't know Japanese, so that's essentially, it doesn't count as an NDA breach, right? I think if we can't understand you.
The sad part is that I can't because
we are mostly
title
kidding.
is
We're not going to
kind
ask
of
you to do that. Yeah, don't worry
Japanese.
about it.
Okay. Say no more. You're working on the Mario project.
Yeah, that's right.
Obviously.
For Cartoon Network. Yeah, exactly.
For Cartoon Network.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's great.
yeah, we're really excited about the show, and right now it's like this job is like it's crazy how good this thing is, because we're just pitching ideas, and we're just like talking about the story and like creating new characters and like creating the world, and essentially we're still in development. So the series hasn't even really started yet, and as soon as that happens, we're going to have so many story ideas, and it'll probably be maybe a year and a half before it actually airs, but they'll probably announce it maybe 6 months down the line.
Cool.
Well, you'll have to hop back on when you're allowed to talk about what project it is, and we'll announce it to everybody. So that'll be awesome.
That would be awesome.
Before we head out of here, you have just a wealth of things to talk about, and I have questions that I have in my list, and we just never made it. Would you help us choose our categories for next week?
Okay, yeah.
Perfect. All right, well, that's it for the interview portion of the episode. Up next, we're going to draw some tokens. The tokens portion of every week is when we get to find out the categories that we have next week that we have to pick our topics based on. And so I've got these 3 tokens. They're very real, very tangible. I'm going to put them face down. So this is all that I'm going to see, but I'm going to shuffle them up on my desk, and you're going to give me a number, Mark, between 1 and 3, and you'll be picking for Luke. Go ahead and give me a number now.
Okay, 3.
Luke, you got art and design, your favorite.
Thanks.
All right, and then go ahead and give me a number between 1 and 2, and you'll be picking for Patrick.
I need movies. I need movies this week. That's the one I need.
Number 1.
Patrick, you lucky friend.
Thank you. All right, good.
Patrick has TV and film. Congratulations, Mark. That means I have toys and games.
Awesome.
Sucks to be me. I guess I got to go buy a new game. Thank you so much for chatting with us. You're seriously
Absolutely.
like, to say we scratched the surface. You said so many things that I think draws a lot of inspiration for me. Draws a lot of man, I could be way better at this than I am out of me, and I know that our listeners are that same way. So, thanks for bringing that knowledge and bringing your experience.
Absolutely.
You can find show notes and links to all the stuff we talked about in this episode, as well as archives of so many other super talented people. We've talked to, who did we talk? We talked to Diana Ritchie, who is she's the executive producer over at Fox. You were at Bob's Burgers, so over at Fox with American Dad. You can find that interview, which is very similar. We talked about a lot of this stuff and her journey over at the archive. You go to mf1podcast.com/archive to see all of those episodes. Go to mf1podcast.com and you can find all of this other stuff on there. Connect with us on social media. Search MF1 Podcast on all the different platforms. Subscribe on iTunes. It is super easy. Doesn't take a lot of time. And then you get episodes every single time that they release, and you never have to worry about the release schedule. We come out on Tuesday. Tuesdays and Thursdays. But if you said it, you never have to worry about forgetting it. But you can also now subscribe on our new YouTube channel. Head over right now and subscribe on there. Help us get our custom link so that we can say something really simple like go to youtube.com/M1podcast. Right now it's like 17,000 digits and they're all like numbers and alphanumeric garbage. So go subscribe now to help us get that up and running. We have some really cool stuff coming very, very soon on our YouTube channel. So now is the time to subscribe while it's fresh and hot out the oven, as Patrick says daily.
Hourly, nearly.
Also, to join the conversation, we have an amazing community of incredibly talented artists, designers, illustrators, entrepreneurs, doers, creatives of all types in our Slack community. Go to mof1podcast.com/Slack. We love that group of people. There's over 200, getting closer to 250 people in that community conversing every single day, sharing ideas, sharing their work and all sorts of cool stuff. Join that conversation now. Don't hide your stuff under a bushel basket. Share it with friends who are here.
As Luke says daily.
That's I learned that directly from Luke. He texts me that every morning.
Yep.
It's super encouraging. It gets my day started just right. But for now, we're gonna go ahead and get out of here. I'm Andrew.
I'm Patrick.
I'm Luke.
I'm Mark.
Peace out.
Bye.
Hold on to your butt.
Otaku Psycho!
Here's a great thing that happened at the Dublin airport today.
Can I just record this real quick?
Yeah.
A headstone with the inscription "You'll never be forgotten" was left at the Dublin airport.
Well, that'll make it to the bloopers. Cool. All right.